What's up guys, I'm randomfrankp, and Razer just dropped a brand new keyboard that is a huge bomb in the gaming keyboard community, features a lot of first time things from Razer, as well as borrowing a few things from the custom keyboard scene. This is a big one. Meet the brand new Razer Blackwidow V4 75%, a brand new layout with all new features, like a hotswap PCB, features brand new Gen 3 orange lubed tactile switches, and a bunch of internal mods to make this feel and sound better than any Razer keyboard in the past. So you're gonna wanna pay attention to this one if you're in the market for a new gaming keyboard. We'll go through it all in my review of the Razer Blackwidow V4 75%. You can see right away at first glance, the 75% layout is a welcome design over their full-sized TKL 65 and 60% from years past. This now completes the layout quintuplet availability. So inside the box, we get a USB-C cable. Unfortunately, it's not coiled, but since it's removable, you can always just use your own. And once powered on, you'll see the full chroma lighting with a strip on each side for some extra side glow. We also get a magnetic detachable wrist rest with that carbon fiber-like weaving to its design. And we also have a double-sided keycap and key switch puller. One side pops off your keycaps because, like I said before, for the first time ever on a Razer keyboard, we have the ability to swap out switches. Using the key switch puller lets you pinch the switch prongs to easily pop them out of the hotswap PCB, bringing the most customization we've ever seen to a Razer keyboard. Say you don't like the new redesigned orange tactile switches, you can now use your own. Inside is a 5-pin north-facing PCB, which lets you use switches with 5 or 3 pins, even though the Razer switches only have 3 pins themselves, so nice to see they gave us that 5-pin compatibility still. And taking them apart for a closer look, these new Gen 3 tactiles have a 3.5mm travel distance and actuate at 2mm with 50 grams. They're rated at 100 million click lifespan durability, and for a tactile, they're decently smooth. Razer does factory lube them, but with a very small amount, just on the bottom of the stem for when it bottoms out, as well as the bottom of the pole. But in terms of construction, nothing too fancy or out of the ordinary, no dampening or muting pads are integrated here, just a bright orange box stem inside the all-transparent housing to maximize the RGB LED to help it shine up through the keycap legends. But tolerance-wise, the box style around the stem keeps them pretty tight against the top shell, so it really doesn't have much vertical or horizontal play to them, which is another bonus. Interestingly, Razer does plan to sell these switches on their own, in case anyone really likes them and wants to maybe add them to your keyboard at home. You can be the judge on whether these switches are for you when we do a switch comparison and a sound test coming up. So I don't know when exactly you'll be able to purchase the orange switches separately. I'm also not 100% sure if they're going to make their green and yellow switches available for purchase as well. But these may not feel as good in your keyboard as they do in this one, because they're doing some pretty interesting internal mods that we'll talk about in just a minute. But first, let's finish up taking a look at the rest of the keyboard. So for a 75%, it's pretty compact and follows that same design language from their previous Blackwidow V3 Mini Hyperspeed, for example. And I'm really happy to see them go with the compact 75 layout versus a scattered or an exploded layout, where you'll see in other 75% keyboards where like the arrow keys are offset. I never really liked that aesthetically. Keycaps here are a double shot ABS plastic, so not PBT, but they are finely textured to avoid picking up smudging or fingerprint oils. And again, versus other gaming keyboards out there, I appreciate Razer's clean font choice that's evenly illuminated from those transparent switch shells. On the top right-hand side of the board, we have some extra controls with a knurled volume dial and 2 buttons below it. One is a multimedia button, and the right button is a mute button. The mute has a red ring to show you visually that your system is muted, and the left multimedia key can be double and triple tapped to like skip songs, rewind a track. And the volume wheel has these nice tactile steps to it, but oddly enough, it doesn't actuate in. And I would have preferred that because the act of just pressing in the volume dial is a lot more natural to mute your audio, like pretty much every other audio wheel out there on keyboards. So interesting that you can't do that. And that also would have freed up the second button up top to be an extra function or a macro. And also worth pointing out, the multimedia button next to it cannot be reprogrammed in Synapse. Then, like I showed before, there is an LED strip on each side for some extra chroma lighting on your desktop. Just adds more visual pop to the board with the integrated side glow. And lastly, the leatherette wrist rest is definitely a nice addition. I also appreciate the fact that it's magnetic, so it can hold into place, and I'd say it has ample cushioning, nice and pillowy to the touch, so your wrists will like that. Now, I mentioned before, Razer did some interesting things inside the keyboard to improve the feel and sound profile of the board to make those tactiles pop. To show you, underneath are 6 screws. One is hidden behind this sticker under the USB port, but only 6 screws are needed if you want to take it apart, which is definitely nice. This also means no more screws on the top plate underneath keycaps, which was always an eyesore once you noticed them. Be careful when opening it up because inside there are 3 connected cables, and you don't want to rip them out of place or damage them, obviously. But right away you can see we do have a layer of foam which was sitting on the bottom, and the PCB has tape on it. Yeah, so they actually included a stock Tempest tape mod pretty much with their own take of the community favorite tape mod. Very, very cool to see, and just goes to show that Razer does listen to community feedback and attempt to keep up with the latest modding trends. Again, very, very cool to see this tape mod included stock. It's all one piece too, as you'll see, instead of multiple strips of tape layered onto each other. But it doesn't end there, people. Razer also has a layer of foam sandwiched between the top plate and the PCB, and you'll see these pour-on gasket strips on the top and bottom sides of the PCB, because we also have another first from Razer in their lineup of gaming keyboards. This is gasket mounted, not tray mounted. These pour-on gaskets in theory will allow for some flex to the board when you're typing or gaming, but stock, I would say it's still pretty stiff. My recommendation is to loosen the screws underneath about halfway, so they're still keeping the board together, but so there's just less clamping force on those gaskets, letting them provide that nice cushion. Okay, so how does all this foam in the new tape mod actually play out in the keyboard? What I'm gonna do is give you a switch test comparison with these Gen 3 orange tactile switches versus other tactile switches out there on the market, so you can hear the difference between them. Then we'll do a full sound test of the keyboard stock so you can hear how it sounds. So honestly, I think the tape mod is doing a lot of work here, and it does make the tactiles pop a bit more, which is the overall purpose of the tape mod. I don't mind the switches at all. Honestly, I think, given the comparison, they're like second best, just my personal preference, to the upcoming Pulsar Black Hole tactiles. But yeah, for a stock switch in a keyboard like this, I think they sound pretty good for a tactile. I will say the stabilizers here are definitely pretty meh. They just have this slight scratchy stickiness to them. They are factory lubed, but they're plate mounted, which is most likely that grinding I'm hearing. But Razer said you can actually swap out these plate mounted stabilizers to use your own screw-in stabilizers, which I 110% recommend doing. Even though they are factory lubed, that grinding is most likely a result of them being mounted to the actual plate. Now you take a look at this as a whole, with it being gasket mounted, a hotswap PCB so we can use our own custom switches, the layers of foam, the tape mod. It's very, very clear that Razer took a long, hard look at the world of customs out there and said, okay, what can we take from this to use in our own keyboards and improve our product? And I really respect and appreciate them for that, because it shows that they are actively listening to feedback and taking mods to improve their own product, which is something that not a lot of gaming keyboards out there and companies can even say. A lot of companies have been pumping out the same trash year after year after year with little to no improvements. But all that means nothing if it's not a good gaming keyboard, right? So I'll start off by saying this. I've always made a keyboard with linears. That's just what I'm used to. That's what I prefer for gaming, a light, smooth stroke. So switching to tactiles for gaming was interesting at first because again, I'm just not used to a physical bump in my key presses when the key is actuated. I'm used to linears where I can just lightly press it and know it registered, not physically waiting for a bump to know it registered. So I'd say, maybe at first it took a day or two to adjust, but they're fine. I mentioned they actuate at 1.5 millimeters, so not quite a speed switch by any means, but still a quicker travel distance than a standard keyboard. Now these aren't optical switches like Razer has on their Huntsman lineup. However, one big potential selling point to some people out there is the fact that this can be set to an 8K Hertz polling rate versus the standard 1K polling rate for most keyboards on the market. Is 8K necessary in a keyboard? No, not like it would be in a mouse, for example, but the fact is, it's registering your key presses 8 times faster than a normal keyboard. And maybe it's a placebo effect mentally, but once I did switch it to 8K in Synapse, it did feel faster to me. Sure, there's obviously some advantages to that 8K, so it's not all placebo, but it also didn't negatively impact my PC, which is good to see. I monitored my CPU usage when gaming at 8K, 4K, 2K, and the standard 1K Hertz polling rate, and it was all right around 27% total CPU usage when I was gaming. So really good to know that we didn't see any sort of, usage spike at all when bumping up the polling rate. That has been an issue in the past with peripherals taking up more CPU usage, but that's happily not the case here. But in terms of like my in-game movement, strafing back and forth, getting behind cover, once I did sort of mentally and physically adjust to the fact that these are tactile, waiting for that tactile bump to know that the key switch is actually registered, then really everything was fine. The adjustment time was a day or two, and they are a pretty light tactile switch, all things considered. So it's really instantaneous. Now, what's interesting about that is I feel like tactiles are like the weirdest choice to give us stock in this keyboard. I feel like if you take a look at all three of like the main gaming switches out there between linears, clickies, and tactiles, I feel like in popularity, they go in that order, with number 1 being linear, number 2 being clickies, and 3 tactiles. I personally love tactiles, but I haven't, like I said, gamed with them really. They're great for like a custom build, for like typing and stuff. But for gaming, it's just a very odd switch to include stock in pretty much a brand new flagship release. And I feel like the people who buy this keyboard are probably people who are going to want to swap those out day one with a linear switch. Are they gonna make this in a, in different switch options between their yellow linears and their green clickies? Who knows? I personally have no idea. I assume like that would be the smart thing for them to do, so they probably will. But even though I like the switches, it's just a very odd choice to give us stock on release. Now, biggest point here, MSRP. This is launching at $199.99, so $200 again at first. Sticker shock, sure, but you look at the other flagship releases, usually they're around $250. Granted, this is a smaller keyboard overall, but I feel like 200 is pretty fair. And you take a look at the other popular 75% gaming keyboards out there, there's really not a lot. The one that sticks out to me is the Asus Azoth. That is very closely related to this, same layout, same features pretty much. Granted, that's wireless and also has like an OLED screen and stuff, but hotswap PCB. So this is $50 less than that. Again, I know it's wireless and stuff, so it's tough to do apples to apples here, but given the current 75% gaming keyboard market, I do feel like $200 for this is very, very fair. The pros, I feel like I touched on those the entire way. The modding, all the great improvements that they made over previous keyboards and stuff. I will say the two cons here are the stabilizers, but you can swap them out, and just the fact that we have tactiles. The switches themselves aren't a con, they feel good, they sound good, but just giving us tactiles, I feel like is the biggest downfall when 80% of people out there are probably gonna want linears in the gaming keyboard. But all things considered, a big thumbs up from me. I really, really like what Razer's doing with the Blackwidow V4 75%. And guys, that'll wrap it up for my review. Hope you all enjoyed. If you want to check it out, I'll drop a link for you in the description down below. If you like this review, give it a big thumbs up to show your support. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at randomfrankp, or it's X now, whatever. Yeah, follow me on X at randomfrankp. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Hope y'all enjoyed. Have a good day.